What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches. I'm Coach Steve. I have been doing these small 10 to 15 minute segments for a while now. You might have been watching them when they were more talking about dynasty leagues and just dynasty in general. So now I kind of want to get into more of actual fantasy talk now before the whole dynasty league stuff. That was a lot of fun just to kind of open up what I kind of want this to whole be. Just a 10, maybe closer to 15-minute segment of quick fantasy football analysis so that you have something if you need it in a quick pinch. And that's kind of what I want to do with this series here. I'm going to continue the series as long as I can. I'm trying to do what I'm doing now is hopefully to do a 32 team fantasy preview, basically viewing each fantasy team and kind of just going through the motions in a really quick fantasy analysis for your takes, so you guys have something to kind of work with instead of having to always listen to an hour-long podcast. Or maybe you don't have time to do that, or maybe you want to read something. Reading's no fun for fantasy. You want to listen to it. It brings your fantasy insight such a different kind of vibe to it. So that's kind of what I'm doing here today, guys. And I'm going to go through it before I was doing it with my slides, my 32 team preview by Coach Steve, and kind of just give you guys the fantasy takes that you guys need to be successful to help you win championships. Redraft season is just around the corner here, and I'm just looking to help you guys do a little bit better. During the season, it's going to be different on how I do these, but for right now, I just want to do a quick 10, 15 minute at most segments for you guys. And basically what I'm planning on doing with these 32 team previews is basically looking at the ADP for each player and seeing whether or not that's good for what you're trying to get out of that player and what their expectation are for this entire season here. So let's start with the first one, the New York Jets. As you know, I'm a big Dolphins fan, as you can see by my shirt and by the little thing behind me there, the towel, or I think it's a blanket actually. So I'm not going to be biased here. I'm going to give you guys the most legitimate takes in terms of fantasy possible. So starting off with the New York Jets, like I said, a couple things happened here. They re-signed Braxton Berrios. They re-signed Tevin Coleman. Then they went out and got some free agents, and especially in the tight end position, and CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin. And then they went out and surprised, I think, a lot of people in fantasy and in draft analysis, and going out there to get both Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And in a lot of circles, they were the 101 in their positions in terms of their skill sets and everything. So it was really interesting. And in terms of fantasy, especially for just the offensive line, they didn't really lose anybody in particular. To me personally, that was a key contributor of making this offense run. So it's going to be interesting to see. But we will start with the quarterback position, guys. Zach Wilson. As you guys know, if you've listened to the fantasy coaches, I am a pretty big Zach Wilson believer. Some of you guys think differently. Some other analysts think differently about Zach Wilson. Clearly, his rookie year was a little more uninspiring at best. But with Zach Wilson, he sits at a pretty good ADP right now, 172 on Fantasy Pros. That's about round 15 in a normal 12-team league. Now, at this point, if you're taking Zach Wilson in the 15th round, you're really taking him as your backup quarterback, or if you believe in completely streaming the position and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to throw out there whoever's there at the time. I don't really care about the quarterback position because someone's going to get me 15 fantasy points or more each and every single week. And I think that's what Zach Wilson could be this season. Again, I have higher hopes for Zach Wilson with the improved offense that has around him, but he could be a pretty good streamer for you in the right situation against obviously the right defenses. Down the stretch, he performed much better than what we saw early on in the season with the crazy amount of turnovers and those wild interceptions. I mean, if you were watching those early on games, it was like, can he even play in the NFL? It was really bad to watch. But down the stretch, he was one of three quarterbacks that threw the ball 140 times, did not throw a pick in those last 140 pass attempts of the regular season. And the only other two people to do it was Joe Burrow and Aaron Rodgers, two quarterbacks who are pretty good and we love in fantasy. But Zach Wilson was also able to do it. The turnovers was a big thing. Again, he didn't perform to the level still that we really want, but the improved offense, he's raw. He's got a great deep ball. That was one of his key factors coming into the league. He has some kind of rushing upside. And then overall, he has better pass catchers now. The Jets had the third most drops last year in terms of pass catchers, wide receivers. That's hard to really to show like, oh yeah, I can rely on my team here to help me win. No, you have to do it yourself if you're going to do it that way. And obviously, Zach Wilson himself last year couldn't really do that for us. He was bad under pressure, which sucked. That was a big issue, and they did help trying to patch up that offensive line, but it also helps when you have talented pass catchers and receivers around you to perform to that next level. So I love Zach Wilson. I think he's a better streaming option. I wouldn't really want to take him unless you're in a QQB league. I think he's a pretty solid QB2 because he presents that upside in fantasy because, he's got a great core around him. How do you not want to go after? You want to go after. People are drafting Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson in top end. People are drafting Breece Hall early on. Why are you drafting these guys that you don't think the Jets offense has something attached to it? It's not going to be Mike White or Joe Flacco. It's going to be Zach Wilson. So if you're believing in those skilled pass guys, you have to believe in the somewhat of Zach Wilson. Wouldn't recommend drafting him in a 1 QB league. Just the way it is. I love him, but I'm not really recommending it until we see it on the field. That's what I want to see first. If he performs early on, great. That's awesome. If you want to take him as your QB2 on your backup, that's cool too. But his ADP kind of fits what he showed us last year. Not worth taking early, but has upside that's interesting if you want to grab him late. And that's exactly where he's going in fantasy currently right now. Heading over to the running back situation, the only two guys that really stand out in fantasy this year, obviously, is Breece Hall, the former second-round pick for the New York Jets, and Michael Carter, who was a draft pick of last year. And it's really going to be interesting to see what this team's able to do. Obviously, the New York Jets have some kind of history with the San Francisco 49ers, where a lot of their coaching staff came over there from the prior year. And we all know the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan offense, loves to run the ball and loves to run multiple running backs. So it'll be interesting to see here. But I think Breece Hall is a pretty decent pick in round 5. I probably would want to rate one more round, but he may not be there at that point because the way I see it is that I'm not sure if he's going, they say he has 3-down potential, which he does. He showed 3-down potential in college. He showed better receiving ability during his senior year season, which was always great to see. And, he has that footwork and vision that wowed us. That's why we loved him and going into the draft. But do the Jets want to overwork Breece Hall and not give Michael Carter, who really did flash for us in fantasy last year, some work? So that it's going to come down to how much work does Breece Hall have? Can he get 250 carries? That's the big question. It's potentially there, but again, there's some risks. It's not a clear path. If it was a clear path, he'd be perfect where he is right now in round 5. I think if you're going, 0 RB and you want to take the first running back in round 5, it's not a terrible play at that point. He's definitely a better RB2. Definitely don't feel comfortable as an RB1. In reality, if you want to go running backs early, if you get him as your RB3, that's a pretty good value at that point because you don't have to rely on him, but you're waiting for that upside to really take fold. So I'm interested to see. Again, last year the Jets had 14 of their 18 games with a double-digit rusher. So the likelihood that Hall has double-digit carries in any single given week, it's potentially there. But again, I'm not thrilled with round 5. I'd rather wait till round 6. But again, not terrible value. In terms of Michael Carter, though, we have no exactly idea what they're going to do with Michael Carter because I really thought they were going to let him have the bell cow role. But clearly they don't believe in giving Michael Carter that role, which, again, many of us didn't really believe that he could handle that as the way his stature is. He never really did it in college. So it doesn't shock me too much that they want to pair him up with somebody else. Again, he did really well as a pass catcher for a stretch of time. Unfortunately, none of that was really with Zach Wilson. Maybe 1 or 2 games he had where it was fantasy relevant, but most of it was with the backups. And I think round 8's way too soon for Michael Carter. I think I'd be better off early round 10 to go after a guy like Michael Carter because there's some upside, but we just don't know how much work is he going to get. Is he going to be the 3rd down back, or is he going to be a guy who actually splits time with Breece Hall and be more of that complement where they use 2 running backs, kind of what we saw with Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams last year. So I think round 8's a little too early for Michael Carter. I think, like I said, round 10 is a better option. There's upside there. If this Jets offense continues to improve and start throwing the ball and rack up the fantasy, touchdowns and points, maybe Michael Carter actually has a chance. But right now, I think at best he's a high-end, wide receiver, RB4 right now in fantasy. I think he's about, for me, he's about like 34 right now in terms of my rankings currently. There's some risk because you just don't know what his workload is going to be. I'm not going fast enough, guys. I'm going to try to go a little quicker here. All right, wide receivers. You have Garrett Wilson. You have Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios. Braxton Berrios, he might have at times during the season where maybe one of these guys gets hurt and he sees value at the slot role. Not recommend drafting him, but keep your eyes on him all season long, because if at some point where he gets an opportunity to start again, he performed pretty well with whoever, was out and took advantage of that, whether it was, Wilson or not. Elijah Moore is probably my favorite guy to grab this year in terms of the talent. Maybe not the value, and I'll get to that. Elijah Moore, I think, is really talented, and it fits what Zach Wilson is able to do with the deep ball. And I think he was able to get downfield pretty often last year, and it was really exciting to watch. I mean, he was 25th in deep targets last year with 20. I mean, his 7-game pace when he was amazing, almost 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns, and he was able to be used on end arounds, which is really interesting for a wide receiver in his stature. So in round 7, I'm okay taking him. If you want to take him as your wide receiver 3, definitely better than a wide receiver 2 kind of situation. Again, we don't know who's really going to be the main wide receiver, but I like his upside, worth taking. Garrett Wilson in round 10, I don't mind it either. He might be more of the, his route running was amazing coming into the draft, but he might be more that underneath route kind of wide receiver, where he might be better in PPR leagues than he is in a standard, maybe half-point PPR. He might be able to rack those PPR points up as a safety blanket to Zach Wilson. Again, loved his talent. Love to see where he's able to do in the NFL. Round 10 is not terrible. Corey Davis might be the best kind of late-round grab in the draft, because last year, Corey Davis, his catch rate was pretty bad, but he was on a career pace in terms of his fantasy production. I mean, you take his 7 games that he played in, I mean, he was on a record pace for 166 targets. And, they paid him to be the wide receiver 1 there a years ago. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with Corey Davis. I think if you want to take Corey Davis with your second to last picks, I think it's not a bad idea, because you wait the first few weeks, and if nothing happens with him, you cut him. You go get one of the waiver wire pickups of the week. But if he goes off early on, maybe that's the value that you want in fantasy. And in the last round of your draft, you may be able to get him pretty easily. Again, Braxton Berrios, he's going to be a guy during the waiver season that you're going to pick up. But I don't hate the Jets offense. Elijah Moore is the most talented, I think, in terms of explosiveness. Garrett Wilson might be the safest, and Corey Davis might end up being the sleeper for this wide receiver core. In terms of tight ends, you have CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin. Both undrafted guys that I wouldn't really recommend drafting this year. Again, they may be more waiver wire bye-week replacements. It's really interesting to know about this tight end core, because honestly, they didn't really target the tight ends much last year in New York. And again, there's a reason for it. The tight ends weren't really that great overall. CJ Uzomah was always, to me, a better blocking tight end, someone who could help with the run game. Again, he played his career best last year with 493 yards and 5 touchdowns. Again, he's 28 years old at this point. I mean, that was his best season, and it had to be when Joe Burrow started airing the ball out. Will Zach Wilson air the ball out as much? I don't know. Tyler Conklin is one guy, especially in deep leagues, and someone to keep your eyes on early on in waivers, because I think he's more the passing tight end for this fantasy team. Because, I mean, you saw last year he did really well as the Minnesota Vikings starting tight end, and he was someone who saw more deep targets and more red zone looks than a guy like CJ Uzomah did. And I think the one thing that people underestimate about this tight end core, that both guys were top 10 in yak yards last year. So they clearly wanted to bring in tight ends who had the ability to really do something with the ball after catching it. And I think that's the best thing for Zach Wilson is to put the ball in the hands of his playmakers, or just pass catchers in general, and let them do things with the ball here. And I think those are pretty good tight ends. Again, they paid up to get these guys. They also have Jeremy Ruckner, but I don't think he's going to make waves early on in the season, especially when they both paid Uzomah and Conklin, I think almost close to $50 million to join this team here. So I doubt they're going to give a rookie an opportunity early on. But both these guys have some appeal, and we'll see early on. I think Tyler Conklin has been doing more in minicamp and whatnot, because CJ Uzomah, I think, is recovering from an injury. But both guys aren't worth drafting, but keep your eyes on them. So that's going to wrap me up tonight, guys, here. I hope you guys enjoyed this. These are just quick little 15-minute segments of fantasy previews for each NFL team tomorrow, or I'm going to try to do the Miami Dolphins next here. Again, I'm not going to be biased at all. I'm going to give you straight as it is. I'm not going to do something that I wouldn't do in my fantasy leagues, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. If there's a team that you want me to do first early on, let me know. I'm going to start with the AFC East, but I can always adjust it. There's 32 teams, so it doesn't really matter to me. I do appreciate you guys all for tuning in tonight. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you are just tuning in now, go back and please rewatch the show. I hopefully gave a lot of great information for your redrafts coming up in the next month. So thank you guys all for listening. Tune in until next time, guys, and have a great one.